Hello, Kiss Army. I'm Pasquale Veri, and welcome to Let Me Know a Short Kiss. Unfortunately, Claudia couldn't make it for this episode, but I am joined by our recurring panel guest, Michael Bornesian. Thank you so much for stepping in, my friend.
Hello, Pasquale. Nice to see you again on such short notice. But
As
thank you for having
usual.
me on. And it's a habit, but it's all right. It's all good. We're talking about a great subject, by the way.
Exactly. So we'll be talking about Eric Carr. Born July 12th, 1950, Eric Carr was the drummer for Kiss from 1980 to 1991. Unfortunately, he passed on December 24th, 1991 at the age of 41. He would have been 74 today. So in this episode, we're going to pay tribute to the late, great Eric Carr. So let's talk. Michael, what did Eric Carr mean to you?
Well, as I've stated a few times before, I was a mild Kiss fan for about 10 years, from 83 to 93, and then after that, I became a big fan. So Eric Carr's years in Kiss, I would see him in the videos, I would hear him in the singles and this and that. It was only after, I got into Kiss, and unfortunately after Eric passed away, that I really started to understand what Eric brought to the band. So in terms of what he meant to me in terms of Kiss, because I didn't know him personally, obviously, so I can't answer the question in that sense. But in terms of what he meant to me as a member of Kiss, when I thought about this, the first word that came to my mind was stability. He brought some stability to the band. There were, the late 70s, you saw the unfortunate steady decline of Ace and Peter. And by 1980, Peter was not there anymore. So, Eric coming in and being this team player that was there for every show, gave 110%, brought a new sense of energy to the band. So, for me, especially when I was, rediscovering, 1973 to 1993 Kiss, when I became a big fan in the early 90s, that's what I took. That was the main thing that I took away, was that, wow, look at this guy. He came, after everything they went through with Ace and Peter, look at what he brought. I've never heard him or saw him have a bad show that I've listened to or watched on video since. And, that's really important, especially, for Gene and Paul after, X number of years of having that instability. The other thing I think he meant to Kiss and meant to me was his drumming prowess. I mean, Peter had his style, and a great style, and it was the right style for the 70s. But you had Eric come in, and all of a sudden there was this John Bonham prowess that he brought to the songs. Like, he could do these drum fills. The drum solos he would do you know, were beautiful to watch, and you were riveted by them. So he was able to musically take Kiss to another level in term, with the drumming style that he brought to the band. So that's what he meant to me in terms of the drummer in Kiss that he was for, the 12 years that he was there.
Mm-hmm. I remember when Eric joined Kiss in 1980, I was 12 years old. And to be honest, I didn't care that Peter was leaving the band. It's just, to me, it was Kiss. And here's a new member of Kiss. Here's somebody new for me to discover. And I remember going to the store, trying to find magazine after magazine, any bit of information about this new character. Who is Eric Carr? What is the Fox? What is about? I want to know everything about it, Unfortunately, maybe a year or 2 years later, I kind of checked out of the band, and I came back in 1989, and I never got to see how Eric progressed as he was progressing in the 80s. Only like you, looking back, I saw that, the man that he was, the drummer that he was, what he gave to the band. But I remember, going to see Hot in the Shade, and we'll talk about this later, but man, his drumming really struck me. And it's like, this is the guy that I was introduced to in 1980. This is the guy that I want to hear all about in 1980. And here I am seeing him on stage, and this guy's drumming is just incredible. So Eric was part of my reason to be back into the Kiss camp.
Okay, great. Great answer. Great answer. Okay, I get to ask a question for once. So, Pasquale, tell me, in terms of the albums that Eric appeared on, is there an album that you feel best represents Eric's drumming?
Oh, that would have to be Creatures of the Night. I
Hmm.
mean, that album, I love the way it was produced, the bombastic drumming on that album, the thunderous drumming on that album really brought each of those songs to life. And even if I wasn't a fan of some of the songs on that album, his drumming made those songs great. And I think Creatures of the Night was an amazing record. And I can't help but wonder, would the album have been that amazing, that great without Eric Carr? If anybody, if Peter Criss was doing it, as much as I love Peter, would the
Hmm.
album have been as good as it was? I
Yeah,
don't think so. So for me, for sure, the best representation on an album is Creatures of the Night. How about
right.
you?
Well, I agree with you. I mean, the style of music on Creatures of the Night doesn't really fit Peter's style of drumming. So it's, you know, I can't imagine Peter walking in and saying, "Oh yeah, I'm going to do this." It took an Eric Carr style of
Yeah.
drummer. Someone with a John Bonham sensibility. I keep coming back to John Bonham, but Eric was a big fan of Zeppelin, and Paul has never shied away from his Zeppelinism. But yeah, Creatures of the Night definitely is a good representation. But also, I think Lick It Up. I think those two albums together are a very good if you want, if someone came to you and said, please show me why Eric Carr is so talked about in the Kiss world. Why is he so revered? Why do people say so many positive things about him? Show me. I'd give them a copy of Creatures of the Night, or I'd point them to Spotify, depending. But in my case, because I collect physical stuff, here's my copy of Creatures of the Night. Here's my copy of Lick It Up. Go away, listen to these 2, 3 times over, and then I think you'll get it. All the other albums are great. I mean, his drumming. There's no album where I think, okay, his drumming is not that good. Even on the Elder, I mean, he was drumming specifically for that kind of music, but his real style of drumming, aggressive style, didn't come out until Creatures of the Night, or perhaps more specifically, the 4 studio songs on Killers. But Creatures of the Night was really the one where it was like, oh, here's Eric Carr. Here's what he can do. Here's why he is going to. Here's the jolt of electricity he gave Kiss back in 1980 when they were touring in Europe and Australia. You know, so yeah. So for me, it would be Creatures and Lick It Up.
Okay. So I have a similar question for you. So which tour do you think best showcased his drumming?
You mentioned the Hot in the Shade tour earlier. That's definitely one of them. And realize I never saw any of I never saw any of these tours actually. I've only seen them retrospectively, obviously. But when you consider the amount of songs that the band did on that tour, the fact that they played 2 hour sets, I mean, from the point of view of quantity and quality, well, geez, you're getting 2 hours of Eric Carr drumming, and by the halfway point of that tour, his drum solo was back in as part of the show. So it's like, okay, I'm getting 2 hours of Eric Carr drumming, and I'm getting to see a drum solo. Well, so definitely Hot in the Shade, a lot of bang for your buck. But you know definitely, I think if you were a European fan or an Australian fan, your first introduction to Eric was obviously in 1980. So if you're a European fan that perhaps first saw Kiss in 1976 when they first toured there, here you are seeing them again for the first time in 4 years, and it's like, whoa, look at this guy. He's replacing Peter. Okay, he's not Peter, but it sounds great. And Australia loved them in 1980. I mean, they could do no wrong. So that definitely was a highlight tour for me. But if you look at the years of 83 and 84, you're starting with Creatures of the Night, and then by the end of 1983 they're touring with Lick It Up, and finishing up in 1984. So for North American audiences, those were the shows that really gave North America their first chance to see Eric uh, doing what he did, because I mean he was in the band for what, 3 years almost, until a North American audiences really got to see him,
Mhm.
because there was no tour for the Elder, and Unmasked only toured overseas. We're in North America, so for us, Europe and Australia are overseas. So the rest of the world knew, but we didn't. really know. So yeah, those tours definitely highlights. I mean, no disrespect to the other tours, Crazy Nights or Asylum or Animalized, but when I think of Eric's drumming, you know, you know, his drumming on on tours, those are the ones that come to mind for different reasons, obviously, that I just said.
Would you have been able to appreciate his drumming if you only saw it on video? So if you never saw him live, do you think
Yeah.
you'd be able to really appreciate his drumming?
Yes, because I mean, I'm seeing the same thing, right? It's just a different medium. If I see a show live and I see the drummer or the guitarist or the singer or whatever, I mean, I never saw Zeppelin live, but I can watch The Song Remains the Same or anything else, or listen to Zeppelin live and appreciate, Robert Plant's vocal prowess. I mean, I guess there would be definitely more excitement in seeing them live and in person. It's like, oh my God, look at that. That's Eric Carr, and he's like less than 100 feet away from me, and
Mm,
I can feel every hit of the drum, kind of thing. But in my circumstance where I wasn't ever able to see him live, well, I gotta, you take what you can get, kind of thing. And what I can get now, and what any of us can get now, given that he's unfortunately no longer with us, is we can, we have all these documents of him, audio and visual, of him doing what he did best, not just drumming, but also, it's worth mentioning, he was always very good with the fans. you know
yeah.
I struggle to think of an article or any kind of thing that I've ever read about him being disrespectful to fans who wanted to talk to him or get his autograph or have a simple conversation, or this or that kind of thing. I mean, Bruce Kulick is carrying on that tradition. I mean, he's very much similar, and him and Eric were in the band for 7-8 years together. So obviously they, you know, one rubbed off on the other, or vice versa, kind of thing. But yeah, that as well. It's worth noting.
Because the reason I ask is that I've only seen Eric live for Hot in the Shade. So for me, that's my live reference to Eric. And I've
Yeah.
seen his other stuff, obviously, through video,
Hmm.
from the 80s. But, nothing for me compares to what I saw this playing during Hot in the Shade. I can
Oh,
only imagine,
completely understand.
right? I can
Yeah.
only imagine having seen him in Australia when he first played
Mm.
Australia. That for me, that would have been my top for sure. But
Yep.
it didn't come across on video the way it really came across live for me for Hot in the
Yeah.
Shade. So
I
for
think it's because you actually got the chance to see him live. So you were able to have that experience. I didn't, unfortunately. So I'm left with what I have, kind of
right,
thing.
right,
But in your case, it's like, oh man, it's like in the past, in some past episodes that we've talked about. I mean, you've gone back once or twice to the first Dynasty show you ever saw. I mean, that for you is like the best Dynasty, the best Kiss show you've ever seen. Why?
absolutely,
Because it was
absolutely.
your first time. It was, you couldn't believe you were there. You were 10 years old. Everything was new and fantastic. So similar. Not exactly the same thing, but similar. So yes, I understand why you would say that the 1999 hits, 1990 hits concert or tour
Yeah.
would be your pinnacle kind of thing, because you were actually there. You were actually able to look and say, oh wow, look at that, those four guys, wow.
No, and like you said, in the hits tour, they play songs from their classic catalog to their 80s catalog. So you really got a good representation of his drumming all in one show,
Hmm.
So I thought, I've got the
Yeah.
best of both worlds right here. So it was fantastic to see him play live. And to this day, it
Mm.
stayed with me. His drumming stayed with me. From his album Creatures to this day stays with me. But for his live stuff, it's hits, and I will never forget. And I can't believe that I actually had the opportunity to see him play live. I only wish I had the
Mm.
opportunity to meet him because, like you said, so many fans have so
Understand.
many great things to say about him.
Mm. Yeah, completely understand. So my next question to you is, well, we've kind of talked a bit about his qualities, but what qualities do you think Eric brought to Kiss when he joined, and not just when he joined, but throughout his 12 years with the band? What were the qualities that you think he brought to to Kiss?
I remember the first interview we did on our podcast, and our guest basically got to meet Eric Carr and got to talk to him and get to know him. And it's like, I can't believe I'm listening to somebody who actually met him, and we're getting firsthand information, a firsthand account of what Eric Carr was like. It was
Mm,
incredible to listen to. It's like I really sensed like I knew the guy, you know? And then progressively, as we interviewed more people, we interviewed more people who met Eric Carr, and it was the same story over
mm,
and over and over again. He loved the fans. He gave the best of himself, his time, and
mhm,
when you were with Eric, you felt like you were best friends. You know, such a nice guy, so kind-hearted. And I think that's the best thing that Eric brought to the band was humanity, was the ability to show people that you're human, just like everybody else. That Kiss is
mhm.
accessible. They're not these larger than life heroes. They're people like you and me. Here's the proof. Let's chat. So for that, he was incredible. And like you said earlier on as well, it's that stability at a time when Kiss
Mm,
had no stability with Vinnie Vincent and unfortunately Mark St. John. And then when Bruce Kulick came in, that's when the band finally found their way and moved forward in a stable manner. But Eric was there from the beginning. Imagine poor Eric coming into the band thinking, I'm in a rock band, I'm in Kiss. This is going to be crazy. And what are they doing? The Elder. It's like, what? That's his introduction to the band. But you know what? He didn't fight it. He just went with the groove, and it didn't work out. And he did Creatures, and he will forever be recognized for that album. And because he stuck through with the band, because he had that stability with the band. So
mhm.
for me, he brought humanity and stability to Kiss. And I will, like I'm sure many fans will never forget that about him.
Yeah. I mean, I can't really add anything new here. I mean, I think we've touched on all the things. I agree with you. Humanity, definitely, especially when they took off the makeup. It's like, oh, suddenly we're wearing street clothes. So
Yeah.
let's be down, let's be a bit more down to earth. So it's like, well, you got just the right guy there. You got Eric there. And then eventually when Bruce came in, well, good. Now we have somebody else. It's funny, we talk about stability and the stability he brought into the band, and the lineup, the 80s lineup, the classic 80s lineup, Kulick, Carr, Stanley, Simmons. I mean, in the 80s, of the four of those, who was the least stable? Probably
Hmm.
Gene Simmons.
Hmm.
Given his the distractions that he had in the 80s, let's put it that way. But the band still kept going, and yeah, right until the very end. You never really heard of any kind of schism or any kind of difficulties, perhaps near the end between him and Paul. But even Paul admits that he didn't handle Eric's final months in the best way in his book. I thought that was quite you know human of him to kind of say, hey, I screwed that up. But yeah, I mean, stability, drumming prowess, as I mentioned before, humanity, like you mentioned, yeah, definitely positive qualities to bring to a band that in the 70s were, you know, took on, kind of a superhero kind of persona and wanted to be, a little higher than you kind of thing. And, you should be happy you're seeing us in concert because, this and that. And then suddenly you transition into the 80s and slowly it's like, well, let's leave the makeup behind and let's just be ourselves and this and that. Well, guess what? They eventually got the two right guys
Yeah.
for that kind of a band. They got Bruce, and they already had Eric for 3-4 years. So, you know, couldn't go wrong. And eventually, unfortunately, when Eric passed away, they got another Eric who was also a pretty down to earth guy and also
Yeah.
had a good drumming prowess. So yeah, for sure.
So one final question. So what are your memories of his passing?
So it's funny because with regards to his passing, I didn't know about his passing until maybe a day or two after it happened. And the reason is quite simple. I mean, I've mentioned a time or two before about, some of my other favorite bands uh, on this podcast, other than Kiss. One of them happens to be Queen. I mean, I've always been a big Queen fan, you know, and at the time in 1991, it was becoming obvious that, Freddie Mercury was not doing very well, he probably didn't have long for this world. Well, he passed away on the 24th of November, 1991. And I learned about that immediately and was shocked and devastated by it. It was only until a day or two, a day or two later that I read about Eric's passing in a paper. And I was like, oh, geez, he passed away as well, So, and I think that happened overall, around the world. I mean, Freddie Mercury's passing got more coverage than, Eric's passing, pretty much, because he was the bigger name, so to say. Depends on how you look at it, but yes, overall, I'd say Freddie Mercury was the bigger name, but eventually you had, Gene and Paul writing to Rolling Stone saying, hey, you didn't really give our guy any coverage here. I mean, you completely left him off the books, kind of thing, so that was good of them to do. And Bruce as well. I left him out there, but my memory of his passing is linked with Freddie Mercury's passing, because they both died on the same day. And, and like I said, Freddie's death, I still remember exactly how I reacted when I found out. But that was like on the day it happened. Whereas with Eric, it was, about a day or two later. I remember being in school in the university library, and I grabbed a paper and started reading. And eventually in the entertainment section, there was a small piece about Eric Carr, drummer of Kiss, dead at 41. And of heart cancer, for Christ's sakes. I mean, how many people get heart cancer every year? I mean, an infinitesimally small amount of people, and, just terrible.
I don't remember when I heard about it. I'm sure it wasn't the same day, because at that time we didn't have internet. But I remember when I did hear about it, I was shocked, because in the 80s, I was starting to get to know Eric, and then I checked out. And then in 89, 90, I was getting to know him again, and he passed away. I can't believe this, and I felt such sadness at his passing, at hearing of his passing. And then I thought, thank goodness I got to see him live at least once. Once in my life, I was in the same room with this legend that is Eric Carr, and I felt so blessed to have had that privilege and honor. So, I think we could both speak for all Kiss fans that he has a really special place in our hearts. He's a huge part of history, and we could go on with this, but he could have been a much bigger part of the Kiss band if he was allowed to. Because if you see the record that was released,
Rockology,
Rockology, it's like the stuff, the material that he had was amazing, and a lot of that stuff was so much better than what Kiss was producing at that time. And I'm sure that's exactly what they didn't want, is to be upstaged by his music, which is really, really too bad, because he could have brought so much to the band. So, we often talk about the end of the road and, how we're going to keep the legacy of Kiss alive. Well, look, we've been keeping the legacy of Eric Carr alive for this many years. And this is coming from the fans and obviously from the Eric Carr family. And this is a legacy that will not die, that will not go away. He will be with us forever.
Agreed. I mean, 30 plus years now gone, but, Eric, wherever you are, happy heavenly birthday.
Yeah.
And, all the best to you. And, thank you for the music. That's really all I can say.
Absolutely. So, Michael, thanks again for stepping in for Claudio last minute. I'm trying to make a habit of it, but, I can't help it. Kiss Army, what are your memories of Eric Carr? Let us know in the comment section, and please don't forget to like and subscribe to support the amazing guests we have on the show. Talk soon, Kiss Army.